You're now tuned in to The Twisted Truth with Corey Wesley, where everyday conversations take an unexpected turn. Entrepreneur, artist, author, and truth seeker, Corey Wesley is here to challenge the way we think, question the norms, and bring fresh perspectives to life, business, and beyond. With unfiltered discussions, special guests, and real talk, get ready for a show that's bold, insightful, and always a little twisted. Buckle up, because the truth isn't always what it seems. And now, here's your host, Corey Wesley. Welcome to another episode of The Twisted Truth with me, Corey Wesley. How's everyone doing today? So today's topic is about storytelling and lies, and when to say something and when not to say something. You know, I have this story to share with you. I've been chatting with this gentleman for over a year, and we never really got together or anything. And obviously there was reasons why. My suspicions were always like, oh, this person's in a relationship, right? And oddly enough, with all these gay hookup sites, I don't stay on them on a regular basis, right? So I delete my profiles, I come back, I have different profile pictures. And it's odd that people don't remember who they chat with, right? So this gentleman constantly would hit me up in different platforms when I reappear and things of that nature, right? And oddly enough, I was starting to get, let's just say, frustrated, just frustrated with the whole topic of, hi, how are you, blah, blah, blah. And oh, we should meet and all this stuff. And I usually don't say things, right? Well, I've been starting to be a little bit more bolder in my context of letting people know, hey, you're not getting away with anything, Um, so I would, let them know, hey, we've chatted before, And so this last time, and I mean, this has been a year or so of back and forth going on. He hit me up and was like, hi, I want to meet you. And oh my gosh, you're so attractive. And I was like, look, you've already talked to me several times. You may not realize this. I said, and we never meet. Our schedules are not on time, or, they don't coincide. We're never going to meet. So stop hitting me up. So this is the day he then decides to say, because I'm a jerk, I really am. So I'll say, he's like, so when can you meet? I'm like, now. But to my surprise, this man said, I can too. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, yeah, whatever. Well, he did show up. Now, had a great conversation. Of course, this was an intimate moment. That's all I was looking for. And he did look like he said he did. None of that was a lie. But as the progressing of the day or whatever, we spent nice time, whatever, he starts telling me about him and his partner. Well, I kind of already suspected, but then he says that he ended. This is the key here. He ended the relationship, not divorced. He didn't use the word divorce. He said ended. And then he proclaimed, or then further gave information in regards to why he used the word ended instead of divorce. Now, for some of us, this is the opportunity that we would drill somebody, right? Because we already know that sounds a little odd. They're elaborating on things, right? And this is where I would say when people are beginning to lie, they tell on themselves. There's what I like to say, there's listeners and there's talkers. Talkers tell on themselves. Listeners listen, and they listen for little key points. Like, I'm very intuitive. I kind of can tell when someone's lying or not. And I don't know what it is. It's a gift that I have. My mother said I've had it since I've been a little child. Like I could sum, and not that I'm trying to psychoanalyze anybody, but I can sum up individuals fairly easy because I listen. I'd say less. And I pick up on things when people contradict themselves. So getting back to the topic of him saying he ended the relationship. Well, first of all, I was shocked he was even in my presence because I'm being totally, totally honest with you all. It was a year or even longer since this guy's been hitting me up. I would say 2 years to be exact. And I was just shocked that one, he was in my presence. Two, I kind of already had a suspicion that either something has changed, and maybe it is true that his relationship has changed because obviously he was in my presence, right? So that is somewhat true. But then when he started to divulge more information as we were just chatting. I always say in intimate situations, people tell the truth. Okay. I always feel like when you're in the most intimate, vulnerable places of life, like the bedroom, people share more than they probably should. And so, in this regard, I was listening, you know. So out of nowhere, he says, well, let me explain something. Now I'm looking around like, did I ask? I don't want to know anything else. We had a good intimate moment. I was shocked that I met him. He was very attractive. He looked like he said he did. Sex was, yes, sex was like what they said it was. And it was good. I was fine. So he then proceeded to say, well, let me explain why I say end and not divorce. Because in a year or so, I'm going to be changing my job, or my job is going to be ending, and I need insurance, and I'm on his insurance. So I'm not even sure. This is where I heard, I'm not even sure I'm going to get a divorce because of my insurance thing. And I don't know what's going to happen as far as, my future. So I don't want you to come down the line or feel like I said I ended a relationship and that I'm not getting divorced. See, he was starting to explain that a scenario that maybe they are in a strife. Maybe they are in a very, separated moment. But he was also letting me know ahead of time that I'm not getting a divorce. Because when he first initiated, he said end, right? And he made it clear and he made a point of saying end and presenting it and then saying why he uses end versus divorce. And this is where I say, when it comes down to people telling a tale or a lie or a half truth or whatever, and we can debate whether a half truth is a lie or not, but it's half truth, right? Sort of true, but it's not really true. It's a lie, in my opinion. What do you think? So in our discussion, I just sat there, didn't say anything, but he wanted to make it clear to me that the reason why he was letting me know is so that there's no misunderstanding of why he says he's not in a relationship, but why he used in versus divorce. And I had picked up on that from the get-go. But for him to sit and then proclaim and protest what his truth was, I then knew his truth was not truthful all the way. And I then proceeded to say, okay, and I'm smart. I'm a smart ass. I did say, and you say this to say what? Because I feel like in the conversation, I didn't say anything to lead him into that we would need to have a further conversation, right? About his relationship. I didn't even ask because one, we had spoken for 2 years. He was in my presence. And so that was a telltale sign that something's changed. Okay. But then as it was coming to the end of us kind of, wrapping up, saying goodbye, whatever, it was daylight, whatever, he had to rush home. Okay. And he had to go to work, which is fine. But as we talked, I then asked him, I'm very surprised that you came, blah, blah, blah. And he then said, you know, I know I've been blowing you off for a very long time. And when you said, oh, we're never going to meet, he said, I then knew that I had to show up or follow through because I know I hadn't been following through. More information, right? Because now I felt as if he was saying he wanted to prove a point because he could tell in my energy that I didn't want to be bothered with his back and forth, his indecisiveness, his lies, his indiscretions, or whatever. And so my point of this is when we have conversations with individuals, I think sometimes we're quick to point out people's lies or their when they contradict themselves. And I feel like that's not necessary. I think why I'm sharing this is that you don't need to be validated. You don't need validation in someone's story. Okay. Obviously, I'm not a talker, I am a listener. So I know that, as the saying goes, give enough rope and someone will hang themselves. I have learned as an adult that you don't necessarily need validation when you know and feel something. I always say, if you watch me on TikTok, if you watch me on things, I always end with different mantras that I live by. And one of them is trust your gut. It will never lead you in the wrong direction. And the reason why I say that is because when I was in my youth, and this goes from dating, business, anything, you want to tell them that I know you're lying. But what that only does is it creates conflict that doesn't need to be there. Two, you already know the answer, and they're never going to, once you present to them that you know they're lying, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to gaslight you. They're going to tell you that that's not true. They're going to do all kinds of things to say to you that you're wrong. So why do you need that validation? And so, this is a question I'm proposing to you now. When you are in these conflict situations, do you necessarily need validation? And when is it important to you to, need that validation? Now, many of you might be sitting there saying, well, I might need validation because I'm breaking up and I want to move out and all that, and I need to make that decision. Well, yeah, that might be true to some degree. But I always say that if you need that validation, then you're really not ready to let go of that relationship. You may not be ready to let go of that person. And so to have their validation, to basically see if they're going to be truthful, or even validate that you know what you know, is also to me a sign that you're still not ready. I think it comes to a point when you get to a place where you don't need validation. It's growth, it's trusting your gut, trusting what your experience is, not doubting your feelings. Now, and I feel like sometimes we use the validation as an excuse to make a decision. Tough decisions have to be made when we're in these predicaments where we think someone is lying to us and we have certain feelings or we don't necessarily have facts. Now, I will say playing devil's advocate, sometimes our mind plays tricks on us, okay? And that we see patterns that may not be necessarily there. But I believe that that's up to you to understand, okay, well, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe not. So for this scenario, I have been in so many situations, and knowing the pattern that he has already exhibited by one, not recognizing my photos, giving me the same plight over and over on different platforms, then saying he had to follow through, making a point to tell me that he had a partner, but it was an end, not a divorce. He made those references to me. And if you notice in my sharing that story, I didn't say anything to him. I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't, I maybe nodded, and I might have said, I already knew that. And the odd part is when I said I already knew that, I got no response. And that's when you know that somebody is not paying attention. I always say in the dating world, men in general, and maybe to women as well, they suffer from DDH. They're deaf, dumb, and horny. And that was by Chelsea Handler. But I added something to that. They pay less attention to details. See, I think when people are not aware that I don't think all people set out to lie or cheat or mislead, but what they do is they're masquerading. Okay. And so when someone is masquerading their truth, if you just sit back and listen, and you don't always have to tell them that they're lying to you or that their story is contradicting themselves, you don't have to necessarily point that out to them. I always feel the mature person just listens, smiles, and then that is food for thought, as my mother would say. You have to be able to smile and trust yourself. I say in one of my mantras, love yourself, trust yourself, believe in yourself. And you have to believe that when someone is having ill intentions towards you, you already know it. You don't need validation from it. And that's on you how to proceed. Now you would ask, okay, well, how did you proceed? I said goodbye. However, what I did was I blocked him from the social media because I wanted to see if I would ever hear from him again. Just because anytime he would see me, he would respond to me via the app, meaning out of sight, out of mind. In mind, when you see me, now you want to chat. But now that he met me, there was a couple of things that I did. Maybe you might want to call it sneaky. Maybe you might want to call it a game. I don't really care. It is what it is. But I sent him a couple of things about me, like my podcast or whatever. I a book my latest ebook that I wrote. I sent it to him, and he said, "Oh, I don't read. Is it an audio book?" Which fine, some people do ask that question, but if you're really interested in somebody and you send them a book that you've written, I would be impressed. So I'd be like, "Wow, I'm gonna check it out." His response was, "Oh, it's an audio book because I don't read." That already was an indication that he wasn't going to read it and he wasn't interested in anything other than proving a point to me. He showed up because I said something. And as he identified, I wanted to follow through. I knew at that point I needed to follow through. Now, whatever's going on at home, he needed to rush home. I will say, like I said, there is some truth to what he had to say. But when he was leaving, he was setting himself up to let me know I'm not getting a divorce. So what he was doing was already setting up his lie to me. So the whole point of my podcast today is just to be aware of people's truths and their half truths. You don't need to be validated by doing an investigation. You don't have to confront. Now, there are certain reasons. Obviously, if somebody's sleeping with somebody's best friend or whatever, sure, maybe you need to confront them. But and all in all, to make a decision in your life to what's going to be right for you, you don't have to have validation from anyone but yourself. You have to ask yourself, is this real? And you will know. When I say your gut will tell you, your stomach will hurt, your body will ache, things will happen that is the actual truth of the matter. And so you have to, again, ask yourself, know yourself, make sure that you're not jumping to conclusions, but sometimes listen instead of being a talker. I know that it's hard for us sometimes to want to always interject or something, because we're thinking about what we want to say when someone's talking. And that really means that you're not listening. Talkers versus listeners, if you really think about it. So when you start thinking about scenarios or people in your life that might be telling you something or something's contradictory and you want to confront them, maybe am I ask yourself a few questions. You know, am I jumping to conclusions? Why do I feel this way? What benefit am I going to get out of confronting this person? Is this person going to be truthful if I confront them? If the answers are no, then honestly, I wouldn't approach that person. But again, trust your gut. Your gut will never, ever lead you in the wrong direction. Okay. And like I said, sometimes when people have to tell lies or half truths, they have their own reasoning. And sometimes it's not for us to banish them or punish them for it. But if it's going to affect you, your life, and how you approach things, then yes, work through it, figure out what's best for you. Like this person, I blocked him, haven't heard from him, and probably won't never hear from him. But again, when I create a new profile, he'll pop up again. But now I know how to deal with him. I know that he's in a relationship and maybe it's, like he said, ended but not divorced. So he basically was setting up the future of his future lies to me. But I already know that, and I don't have to play games with him, and I don't have to call him out on it because I have enough information for me to follow through. So this is what I wanted to share with you, this story, so that you have an understanding that we all go through it. People tell us have lies. Some of us, full out lies, but it's hard to follow your own gut and not need validation. It's been truly something that has taken me decades, I would say decades, to get to that point. Because I used to be that confrontational person. Oh, you lying, da 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 da. And really, it never got me anywhere. And honestly, it made it worse for me because then the truth, because they lie and you're confronting them, they're lying, then you see them out to be even more of a liar because now they're not even being truthful. So sometimes I feel like it's not even worth it. So anyway, just remember when someone is giving you a half truth or lying to you, you don't have to set out and make a point and embarrassing them to let them know you're smart enough, and it's food for thought. That's what my mother always said. Sometimes things are just food for thought, and you just keep that in your just for you to know and for you to handle and move accordingly. And that's why I always say people are surprised when you move with suddenly without explanation. Those people will know what they did. You don't even have to say anything because they will definitely know what they did and be surprised. They might even tell you the truth after you've moved on. So anyway, thank you again for listening to another episode of The Twisted Truth with me, Corey. Remember to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about my podcast, The Twisted Truth with me, Corey Wesley. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye. That's a wrap for this episode of The Twisted Truth with Corey Wesley. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who needs a fresh perspective. Remember to stay curious, stay bold, and always remember this: the truth isn't always what it seems. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep twisting the truth. See you soon.